Hi guys, and welcome back. Today I'm going to be going through with you the basics of mixing. So to start with, all of our resins are a 2:1 ratio, and that is required by volume. So we always use a ratio cup to measure out. That can be different size ratio cups. We even have a larger one than this. But today I'm going to be using our 1300ml ratio cup and using our 2:1 ratio. I have a few different stirrer options here. I personally like to use an acrylic stirrer with a right angled edge, as it enables me to scrape around the base and the side of the container, which I'll explain soon. But from your local supermarket, silicone stirrers that have a nice edge to them are quite useful. There are ones along these lines as well that you can get from online suppliers, or your basics like a paint stirrer. So all of these options work well for you as stirrers. As always, we have our PPE, so I'm going to pop on our nitrile gloves before I start measuring out and getting into why we need to mix thoroughly and what's involved. As mentioned, I've got our larger or medium-sized ratio container, and generally with our ratio containers, we actually read them from the inside. So from the inside of the bucket is visually the best to see, and there are multiple different ratios on these containers, as they can be used for other methods like paint and other materials. So we always look for our 2:1 ratio because our resins are a 2:1 ratio. So as I sit the container down, I want to be looking right at my 2:1 ratio. There are two columns on underneath our 2:1 marker. Now we have one on the left, which is under our 2 column, and one on the right, which is under our 1 column. We always pour our 2-part first, which is always going to be our resin. And we then continue to pour with our hardener afterwards. So I'm going to start with our resin component today, because we always measure with that one first. Now I am using our deep cast, Resi deep cast. However, like I mentioned earlier, all of our resins are a 2:1 ratio. So it doesn't matter what type of resin I'm using, I'm still going to be measuring out with my part A first, and my aim is to have the quantity that I want to use and measure that up alongside each column number that you want to pour to get your quantity correct. So today I'm aiming to pour close to my 500ml. So I'm going to look at the inside of my container and look at the mil level on the side. So if I'm going to 500, I'm aiming to look at where my number is on my right hand side column, which is my number 1 column, because that's where our finishing level will be. So if I'm looking at around about the 3 or the 4 figure, I'm either just under my 500ml or just over. So my aim is probably to be just over today. It's always better to have that tiny bit over versus having to try and mix up another batch and make your quantity up to the height that's needed. So my aim for today is to use our 4 on the columns. So to start with, I'll be pouring on the up to the left column number 4 with our part A. I always pour from the side of the container just to have a little bit more control and so I don't drip it out as much. And I'm just on the line of my, top of the line of my 4 column on my left hand side. If you happen to go below or above the line markers, you need to follow through with that in your second column. So for instance, if I poured halfway up my 4 today, in my part like my 2 column, which is on my left hand side, on my right side column, which is my 1 column, I would need to also replicate that and do the same. But today I will be pouring my hardener in my 1 column, which is on the right hand side, up to my top line in my 4 column. And once again, I'm pouring from the side of my container and up to my number 4 marker, top line, to match where I've poured my part A in on my left side. So I poured my part A up to my number 4 on my left hand side column, and now I've poured my part B, which is my hardener, up to my number 4 line on my right hand side column. When I have finished pouring, I always like to do a visual check. I do like to have a quick look and see if it looks like I have 1/3 floating on top and 2/3 below. That way it's just a second checking option in case you may have read the wrong column or you're in a wrong ratio line. If I know that I've got my quantities where I've got my hardener floating on top at 1/3 and what is approximately my 2/3 of my resin on the bottom, then I know I'm right to mix at this stage. Okay, I'm ready to mix. I've got my acrylic stirrer. When I'm mixing any of my resins, generally what I'll do is mix across the base of the container and try to stir through from bottom to top without bringing my stirrer out of the top of my mixture, because I don't want to introduce too many bubbles to my mixture. When doing this, if I'm just keeping to slightly off center to one side of my container, my resin will want to move around and rotate from left to right and then top to bottom. And this is one of the quickest methods to mix your resin thoroughly. Now at the moment my resin's slightly cloudy, so my aim is to mix and get it so it's got a lot more clarity to it. Then I will continue to mix thoroughly around the sides of my container and the base of my container. Our resin really does want to stick to the edges of your plastic mixing cups. And if you were just to continue mixing like this and then pour into your job, you do have a chance of having unmixed resin stuck to the sides and the base of your container, and that can come out in your project, and what will end up happening is it won't self-mix. You'll end up having pockets that'll be uncured. So this stage is really important. Generally, time frame wise, it is approximately 4 to 5 minutes that you do spend on mixing. But the technique itself is really important. So you do need to ensure that you are, after mixing the majority of it to clear, making sure you are getting around the sides and the base of your container. Okay, the majority of my mixture is clear now. And what I mean by clarity is that it doesn't look cloudy like what it does when you start mixing your part A and your part B together. But what I want to check now is I may have some slight bubbles in it, which is completely normal. And if you're pouring out at the correct depths in the right time frame, all those bubbles will release very well. But what I want to check now to make sure I have 100% clear resin is make my way around the sides of the container and the base of the container. And what I'll be looking for is clear hair-like strands. It's almost like translucent hair fibers in your mixture. If you can see any of those at all, that does mean that you have an unmixed portion of your resin in your mixture and you need to continue mixing it through together. So I make my way around the entire sides of the container. At the same time, my stirrer is touching the bottom and the outside corner of my container. So I am also scraping along the bottom. Once I've gone around a couple of times, I do want to scrape right across the base of my container as well, all the way across, making sure I've covered the entire base area. Then I will continue mixing what I've just scraped off the base and the sides back into my mixture with my initial mixing technique. So after my first scraping around the sides and the base of my container, I mix that through thoroughly and I'm just doing a double check again. Making sure I'm slowly going around the outside, getting full contact from my stirrer to the side of my container and the base of my container. And then mixing that back through again. And just to be safe, I'm going around a third time. But what I also like to do is actually hold it up to a light source, whether it's a window or a light in your room, and just have a look from the side of your container while you're stirring to see if you can actually see any of those translucent hair-like strands. And I can actually see a couple in my mixture. I couldn't see them from looking above. So I'm just going to make sure I do thoroughly mix those back through. Because if I am seeing any of those, it does mean an unmixed portion of resin in my mixing container. This process does seem like it's a little tedious to some people, even though it varies with container size and what stirrer you're using. And I do often get asked, can you just use a drill bit mixer? And while you most certainly can use that, what you have to be mindful of is that with a drill bit mixer, you're not actually touching the sides and the base of your container. So if you do decide to use that method, I highly suggest mixing it, quickly pouring that batch into a clean bucket, and then discarding what may be around the edges and the base of your container. Don't sit there and wait and drip everything out, because that will be an unmixed portion. And once you've done that, then that way you're discarding any portion that may be unmixed. The other thing is, using a drill bit mixer, you are introducing a lot more bubbles to your mixture versus hand mixing. And if you do that, it is recommended to ensure that you are pouring it 100% correct at the right depth of pour for that particular resin and in the right time frame, or using some kind of vacuum chamber to remove or degas those extra bubbles that you've created in your mixture. And one last time, just checking again at eye level, holding it up to a light source, just to see if I have any of those unmixed strands. There, I just saw one come through there. Just going to check the sides of my container again, making sure I'm mixing back through. Now, if you're not overly competent with holding your batch of resin up in the air and having a look at it, another way to do it is just have it on the table and angle your container towards a light source, but get down at eye level and have a look at it. And I'm 100% happy with my mixture now. I can't see any hair-like strands in it at all. I have gone around the sides and the base of my container multiple times now. So at this point, this is where I would say we are happy with our mix and we're ready to pour into our jobs or add our metallic pigments or tints into our mixture. So I hope you found that this is a very useful video for you for starting out with resin and ensuring that this stage, the measuring out and the mixing stage, is done thoroughly. If not, you can run into a multitude of problems, so always get these base stages right. But enjoy your mixing and creating, guys, and be sure to follow us. If you've got any comments, please drop them below, and make sure you like and subscribe. And thanks, we'll see you next time.